and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, an incident over a captured drone weighs down relations between China and the U.S. No thanks to President-elect Donald Trump's unprecedented Twitter diplomacy. And we sit down with former WTO Justice, talks about the ins and outs of the World Trade Watchdog and China's prospect as a market economy. And we begin today's show with a dispute between China and the United States over a marine drone. The Chinese Defense Ministry says it has been in touch with Washington regarding the return of the gliders seized in the South China Sea. The ministry's response came after the U.S. had said a Chinese vessel captured one of its underwater devices. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is adding fuel to the fire with unprecedented Twitter remarks on China, raising concern that relations between Beijing and Washington are once again on the rocks because of him.
China's defense ministry said on Saturday night that a Chinese Navy rescue boat discovered unidentified equipment on Thursday afternoon and checked it in a professional and responsible way to prevent any navigational or personnel safety issues. After verifying that the equipment belonged to the U.S., China has decided to return it in an appropriate way. After President Barack Obama's administration's pivot to Asia strategy, the U.S. Navy has gradually strengthened its presence across the South China Sea. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said last week that the current situation in the South China Sea has been stabilized thanks to joint efforts by China and ASEAN countries. It advised the U.S. to respect regional countries' efforts to maintain peace and stability in the maritime body. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump did score China over the drone incident, which he said was unprecedented, before saying that the U.S. should allow China to keep the device. Quote, "We should tell China that we don't want the drone they stole back. Let them keep it," he tweeted. His eyebrow-raising comments stoke concerns about Mr. Trump's strategy in dealing with China once in office, especially in the light of his protocol-breaking phone conversation with Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen and his overt challenge to the One China policy. While China-U.S. relations usually enter a period of uncertainty at a time of administration change in Washington, analysts say the incident highlights concern about the direction of U.S.-China ties amid uncertainty about Mr. Trump's foreign policy.
So what is the prospect of U.S.-China relations with President-elect Donald Trump and the recent incidents of seizure of a U.S. submarine drone? Is that a cause of concern? We are joined in our Beijing studio, Mr. Wang Yiwei, Director of the Institute of International Affairs at Renmin University. In Boston, we have Mr. Jim Walsh. He focuses on security studies at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In Washington, D.C., we've invited Mark Putman, who is a political media consultant and who is the president of Putman Partners. So welcome to the three of you, gentlemen. So, first of all, are we going to see during the electoral vote today any dramatic change about who is going to be the president of the United States? Mr. Walsh, very briefly from you.
Very briefly, the answer is no. I know there's a lot of chatter in the U.S. about electors changing their votes, but all the states have certified the winners in their respective states. One or two could change, but it would be, of course, without precedent, dramatic and surprising. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Okay, Mr. Putman, what about briefly from you?
And we're moving on.
Well, Mr. Trump is very unpredictable, but I agree with Mr. Walsh that the Electoral College is quite predictable. Most of our states do have laws that require the electors to vote the way their state voted. And while some of the electors have requested briefings from the CIA and the FBI as to what they know about the Russian interference in our election, they haven't received those briefings. So I would be very surprised to see them change their vote, and I agree with Mr. Walsh.
If that is the case, then how important is the rhetorics and the words and also the tweets coming from the president-elect, Mr. Trump, after today, the electoral vote result? Mr. Putman, help us to put it into perspective.
Well, I was on your program in May of this year, and I predicted that if Mr. Trump was elected president, that he would be a destabilizing influence in foreign affairs. He was destabilizing in the electoral process here in our country, and so now the world is learning what we in America have been seeing for over a year now. Now, I'm in the opposition party to Mr. Trump, so that might be expected to hear that from me. But I do believe that his whole approach to business, to national affairs, to foreign affairs, is to be destabilizing. He sees that as a way to put himself into a position of strength to make an ultimate deal. But as we all know, it's not so simple in foreign affairs.
All right. Mr. Walsh, I want a very simple answer, yes or no, agree or not with your counterpart in Washington. Just one sentence.
Mostly agree. I think there's a lot of uncertainty here. He doesn't have his cabinet. He doesn't have his national security team. That might moderate or control some of these outbursts. But I think my colleague is right to say there's a real possibility for this. Yes, there is.
All right, Mr. Walsh, as a result of your answer, let me push a little bit forward. Is there capability in Washington with the government mechanisms and also different kinds of balance of power eventually to rein in an unpredictable president, at this moment still President-elect Mr. Trump? Do you have the confidence or not?
Well, on foreign policy, it's mostly no. Our system, our Constitution, gives the president great leeway in foreign affairs. Yes, there's a Supreme Court. Yes, there's a Congress. But they would be acting after the fact. If there's some crisis, the president has broad leeway to act. A court case would come up 6 months or a year later. Congress has the power of the purse, but that's not going to matter much in terms of a crisis or setting new policy. On domestic affairs, yes, but on foreign policy, the president has tremendous discretion.
Mr. Putnam, also briefly from you, your view on this.
Well, it's interesting. I agree with Mr. Walsh, with perhaps the one exception that there are a number of leaders in the Republican Party in Congress that disagree with Mr. Trump's very open embrace of the Russian government and President Putin. So it will be very interesting to see what happens within the Republican Party and the Republican caucus as to how they work with a president who has a very diametrically different view of Russia than they do. And that could then, of course, have effects on other policy, whether it relates to China or domestically. But, we're all going to have to wait and see and watch to see what happens.
We don't have to wait and see too much, I guess. There are already incidents breaking out over the past few weeks regarding even China-U.S. relations, which is arguably, non-arguably speaking, one of the most important bilateral relations in our world today, given where China is now. Professor Wang, therefore, I really want you to come into this conversation. How much, or rather, how serious does China take the words and rhetorics now from the president-elect, Mr. Trump? When you still have President Obama in the office, he follows the policy lines as he used to be regarding China-U.S. relations, but Mr. Trump certainly has been tweeting very different directions of the relations. How serious does China take him?
Well, Chinese feel confused who represents the United States. Mr. Trump, even as a president elected, but his behavior is like still in the presidential campaign. Bash China and take use of all its external relations as he has to Twitter and to want to renegotiate even traditional principles now as can be negotiated. They started to reset the relations with Russia, with China, with any other, even Middle East and Middle East. Confused not only China but all the world. So I think firstly Mr. Trump challenged the authority of the President Obama. Actually, he's still in the White House, but he's too much interfere the American foreign policy. So it makes the Chinese government confused. We cannot respond because he's not a president so far.
But Mr. Wang, you have been a big hand in China's foreign policy analysis. So let me ask you this. You know very well, Chinese part usually give the American counterpart a grace period, let's just say, between administrations. One president going out, the other president coming in. Well, there's a learning curve, there is wrapping up work, there's a lot of party politics going on, so Chinese understand this. How long do you expect this grace period to be different or similar with the previous ones? How long do you think China can give this current president-elect a grace period? And will that be graceful, by the way?
I think Mr. Trump is a very businessman. So what he said, I think he's prepared to bargain with China over maybe next April about trade, even financial, make the RMB, China be the currency moderator and whatever manipulator. So this is, I think, it seems like he made many comments about things they really want to make a deal with China.
Really? Accusations leading to eventually a deal. We'll see whether that's going to happen. But when we talk about grace period, there has been a lot happening in history. History, if it could be a mirror for Mr. Trump, president-elect, of course, he's a very unique personality. We can't guarantee that, but it's important that we look at history. Taking a look at the history of U.S. presidential campaigns, most standard bearers criticize China, as always, to win votes. Though President Richard Nixon broke the ice between China and U.S., his successor, Ronald Reagan, openly supported Taiwan independence before taking office. George H.W. Bush was also against the U.S. normalizing relations with China. Bill Clinton played a so-called human rights card to score China during his election campaign, while George W. Bush put China on the position of strategic competitor instead of U.S. partner. But after taking office, all of them followed the path of building more pragmatic relations with China. But of course, what we're talking about here is the presidential election campaign, not necessarily from the president-elect transforming himself to the president. So, Professor Wang, once again, I want to get your view. Is this president-elect going to be very different? And is China prepared for it? How?
Quite different, because even he's not supported in the Republican Party, So it's not traditional American politician. So even Americans are very confused about his behavior. It's not just about Chinese.
All right. If that is the case, are we going to see Mr. Walsh from MIT? Once president-elect coming into the White House, becoming the president, he's going to tweet whatever he wants, given the fact that the president still have this freedom of expression in your country. But at the same time, the Washington machine would weigh in and express it in different ways. Is there a scenario like this? Once again, are we going to see further confusion around the world about exactly what U.S. means when it comes to policy? Is that going to be a scenario, a plus for your foreign policy or a minus for your foreign policy? Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, well, if I had to guess, I would guess that we will continue to see confusion and disagreement. Part of this is a reflection of the personality of Mr. Trump. Part of it may be, and we'll have to wait and see, a reflection of divisions within the administration. He's appointed very, very different types of people, or at least nominated very different types of people. Some are quite hawkish, neocons, like John Bolton. Others are wealthy business people. Others are moderate Republicans. One can imagine, and generals, lots of generals. One can imagine divisions within the administration. I don't think anyone can stop Mr. Trump from tweeting, and until sort of the reality of international security and foreign policy sinks in, and he sees that, this is actually pretty difficult stuff, we may see an uncertain period in the beginning where there is confusion. And so my advice to countries that have asked me is to take it slow, be prudent here. Remember, he describes himself as a counterpuncher. It's not like he has a grand global strategy. So he's reactive, and I would encourage everyone to sort of take this slow, one step at a time.
Well, what if he is provoking the bottom line of foreign policy? For example, U.S.-China relations. Earlier, Mr. Putman, we all understand Mr. Trump, the president-elect, tweeted things about Taiwan, which is the bottom line of U.S.-China relations from day one. One China policy has been the policy of the United States. That's the condition for bilateral relations between these two countries from day one. And now we see further actions coming from both sides. For example, recently with the drone, underwater drone China captured, and according to the Chinese Ministry of Defense, quote, return to the United States in an appropriate way, end of quote. Mr. Trump reacted once again in a very dramatic way. Mr. Putman, how long can we give him a period of apprentice before we can really take his word?
Well, I think President-elect Trump, soon to be president, is going to have to learn that his word is going to be taken very seriously from day one. And that is going to be part of a growing and learning curve for him. It is interesting and curious that for days after that congratulatory phone call from the Taiwanese leader, that he insisted that that's all it was a congratulatory phone call that he accepted. But then we found out later that it was actually a telephone call that was in the works for months. So now the international community is getting used to what we have been seeing in the United States, that Mr. Trump has a rather flexible definition of being forthcoming and truthful. But he will learn quickly, as Mr. Walsh indicated, that these are very heavy issues he'll be dealing with, and you can't easily reduce them down to 140 characters in a tweet. And where you lurch from one position to another, like he did on the drone, where first he said it's unprecedented, and then he says, well, keep the drone.
Okay.
I think he'll have a lot of folks around him that will guide him.
Mr. Trump, President-elect, expressing his tweets, Mr. Walsh, that he said, we don't want it back. He said about the drone that the Chinese has discovered, which China's promised to return. He said, we don't want it. But that is not a position coming from the Obama administration. In fact, the Obama administration has been quite calm in reaction to this minor incident. So at this moment, how should we understand the future approach to China with the debates already happening right now on this very minor issue?
Yeah, I would not blow this issue out of proportion. I wish that Mr. Trump would realize that as president-elect, his chief job right now is to keep his mouth shut. He is not president of the United States. President Obama is president of the United States, and he can say whatever he wants after he's sworn in, but he's not sworn in yet, and he should be quiet. Now, that's probably not going to happen. But I would not, as I just mentioned before, I would urge caution and prudence. I would not overreact to any one incident.
Okay.
A better policy might be to let these things ride and see where they go, because again, he is reactive psychologically and otherwise. So if someone overreacts to something he does, that's just going to get him all juiced up to respond even more intensely. So I think reason and calm is the way to go.
If one, Professor Wang, has the tendency psychologically to overreact and dramatic reaction, that's not likely to change when he comes into the office, black and white. So, about this, what should China do? Some say China captured the underwater drones from the United States. Trump, the president-elect, likely to see it as quote-unquote a provocation. And therefore, with his dramatic personality, gonna be overreacting to it even more, therefore create a crisis. But the question is, can China not react when there is provocation from the other side? And to what degree should China react, in actions and in words?
Well, Chairman,
it's a dramatic question I put to you. I mean, I almost put you in a very awkward situation, but it's very important for us to understand how rationality works in today's world.
Well, Chairman Mao said, you do your way, I do my way. So you treat your response, president-elected, but China, I think, to show that in the core national interest, in China's national security, even principles, China will be not negotiate. So China will respond in his way, not because of the Mr. Trump's behavior. I think that's the.
There is an article I was reading today from the People's Daily in Chinese. That's of course is an official newspaper from the Chinese Communist Party. It talks about China's attitude. It advises the Chinese leaders to take it steady and calculated, and also keep it calm. This is the advice coming from the article by some experts over there for Chinese leadership. What we are seeing now, Mr. Putnam, are very different personalities between the U.S. leadership to be in the White House and the Chinese leadership with the core of President Xi Jinping here in China. Very measured, sticking to the policy lines every time meeting international dignitaries and talking internationally. How shall we see these personality differences for the future U.S.-China relations, Mr. Putnam?
It's very hard to predict what's going to come of all of this. You know, I, as an American citizen, certainly hope that these disagreements that our countries might have don't escalate into any sort of military action. It's always concerning when you see that that can happen. There are obviously economic measures that can be taken, which can be equally damaging. I think the thing that what the Democratic Party did not do so much in this last election is that we focused mostly on his temperament and whether or not he was fit for the presidency, and did not so much focus on the policies to the degree that they had been developed that he espoused. So I would ask all leaders to take a step back from judging him on his personality and his temperament and his reactive nature, and instead let's look at the policy. Let's look at the actual reactions that will happen in a country economically
Okay.
to what either side is proposing, as opposed to going to a military solution.
All right, Mr. Walsh, final sentence for you. A sentence, please, sir.
Oh, just on that topic. Yes, sorry. Well, I agree. I think it's important to follow actions, not words. Mr. Trump offers lots of words, different words on the
Okay.
same subject. Once he has a cabinet and a staff, follow the actions and then respond to that.
Jim Walsh, Mr. Putnam, Professor Wang Yiwei, thank you so much, the three of you, for being with us. Help us to analyze what's going on now.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. Former WTO judge Zhang Yuejiao talks about how far the trade watchdog has gone in fixing disputes and what's in store for China after 15 years of membership. December the 11th this year marks the 15th anniversary of China's entry into the World Trade Organization, or WTO. It should be the end of the countries being treated as a so-called non-market economy and the beginning of being officially recognized as the market economy. But disputes concerning China's market economy status linger. Beijing has already launched dispute settlement cases against the European Union and the U.S. at the WTO. Take a look at this.
China agreed to let WTO members treat it as a surrogate when it joined the WTO in 2001. After 15 years, the clause would expire, and China lost no time calling for other countries to abide by the agreement.
In accordance with Article 15, WTO members shall stop using the surrogate country approach to conduct anti-dumping investigations on Chinese exports by December the 11th this year. Since then, WTO members shall stop referring to third-party countries in calculating costs in anti-dumping investigations against China.
However, some WTO members like the US, the European Union, and Japan question China's market economy status, although more than 90 countries like Russia, Australia, and New Zealand have accepted it. China expressed dissatisfaction over attempts to shirk WTO obligations to abandon the surrogate country approach when calculating anti-dumping measures against Chinese exports.
Acknowledging the market economy status and honoring international obligations under Article 15 of the Protocol on China's accession to the WTO are two different things. Some people try to confuse them so that they can evade their responsibilities.
Recognition as a market economy, meanwhile, would force trading partners to use domestic Chinese prices as a baseline for judgments about export prices, limiting their ability to impose trade restrictions. Over the past 15 years, China has reshaped the global economic landscape. That's particularly true during the global financial crisis that started in 2008, when China's continued growth became a stabilizing factor and a catalyst for the world economy's recovery.
Despite all these arguments, China's market economy status, as we mentioned earlier, has still led to the hottest debate worldwide. At this moment, China has already brought it to the dispute settlement process, with the possibility that parties involved will come up with eventually consensus through consultation. But the question is, will there be? Nobody could answer it better than Zhang Yuejiao, a former member of the WTO appellate body, the first female judge from China ever to serve in that role, which is, according to the WTO official description, is best performed by a person recognized worldwide with demonstrated expertise and should be broadly representative of the membership of WTO. In an exclusive interview with us, Madam Zhang expressed her views directly as a respected legal expert. Then is there a specific definition of market economy according to WTO rules and regulations?
No, WTO has no such definition with regard to market economy or non-market economy. Only in one footnote of the anti-dumping agreement, for the calculation purposes of normal meaning. So they said all prices, or almost all prices, are fixed by the state. It's deemed as non-market economy to use third country or surrogate countries' prices. That's only for calculation of normal meaning. of anti-dumping investigation.
So now at this moment, according to China, the United States, and the EU, they all have different interpretations of what the market economy status is. What would that mean for this debate, as a result, legally speaking?
As you know, the current multilateral trade negotiations has some difficulties to conclude the Doha round and to pursue new topics. However, the dispute settlement is going on well.
But the dispute settlement, I understand China has already entered that stage toward the United States and the EU. How does that work among members? How long would it take for members to reach any conclusion or consensus?
Generally, there are 4 steps in the dispute settlement proceedings. First, consultation. If one party has requested for consultation and the other party will give favorable consideration, sympathetic consideration, it means they will make a consultation together. If in 60 days they cannot reach an agreement, the consultation fails, then one party may request for the establishment of a panel. The panel is the first stage of the formal proceedings. Then it would take about 9 months to 1 year. Sometimes, if the case is very difficult, very complicated, it may take longer, such as the large civil aircrafts.
As a former member of the appellate body judge, what do you make of the challenges of such cases, such as that between China and the EU, China and the United States at this moment?
Apparently, to me, it's quite clear in terms of legal term, because Article 3.2 of the DSU asks us to clarify
which is
the
dispute settlement
understanding as our procedure. If we are obliged to clarify the covered agreement in accordance with customary rules for the interpretation of public international law, generally speaking, we refer to the Vienna Convention for the law of treaty. Based on Vienna Convention, we have to look at the object, purpose, text, context, and the normal meaning of the provision.
I see.
So Article 15 on the face of the document is clear. The normal meaning of the wording, Article 15, shall terminate in any event. Shall terminate, shall, in legal term, is a legal obligation. So shall terminate on 11 December. To me, it's quite clear.
Whether it is dispute settlement procedures or eventually going to the appellate body for the final judge, it takes time. It takes probably 1 or at least 2 years, and that means a lot when it comes to real benefits of countries and parties involved.
Overall, if compared to other international dispute settlement system, I would say that WTO is doing okay.
Really? I mean, look at
because the average of closing a case is about 2 to 3 years. But if we look at some other system, it may take 3 to 4 or to 5 years. So it's really depend on the complexity of the case, and it depends also on the availability of resources.
Is this platform still going to be viable? How viable will it be? I was talking earlier to Pascal Lamy, the former Director General of WTO. He was saying he loves the Chinese idiom, which is called, whether it's black cat or white cat, as long as it catches the mouse, it's a good cat. But the thing is, what if other good cats all emerged? Will WTO still be the best cat?
I agree with Lamy on that.
You all love cats.
Don't forget, we all pro multilateralism.
Yeah.
So that's why the WTO has issued a new report mentioning that also criticize the anti-globalization, those articles or debates. Because really globalization has brought many benefits to enhance the standard of living in general.
But some would say, some of the, the presidential candidate would say, well, China has benefited the most from the WTO. Is that true?
Oh, first, I don't want to take a position to defend any party, but I have learned through the newspapers, China has also made a great sacrifice. For instance, to reduce the overcapacity of mining of coal or steel mill.
Yeah.
So they have laid off many workers. They have to find new jobs for those workers.
Yes,
so this is a burden. But they are doing well, particularly some provinces, quite impressive. My view is, as the current DG mentioned, that in the United States, according to their studies, that it's not the globalization took out their jobs, but rather the technology. So they have to see to find the real problems.
And to see where the engine of the growth should be.
Yes.
How
And the
does-
trade works.
Are you
So
worried?
anti-trade is not good, particularly to reduce poverty. For all multilateral financial development institutions, I have been to the World Bank, to the Asian Development Bank, to the Western African Development Bank. I saw so many poor people and the low-level developed countries. So they need aid for trade. They need international cooperation. So once they join the international cooperation, they can improve their standard of living.
Before serving on the WTO appellate body, Zhang Yuejiao already possessed a highly impressive track record. She was one of China's chief negotiators on intellectual property and was involved in the preparation of China's patent law, trade law, and copyright law. She also served as the chief counsel for China's GATT resumption and WTO accession. In other words, she was almost all involved in all the most important legal works regarding China and the world. As one who lived and played a key role in all these unprecedented legal processes, Zhang told me she had a lot of pressure, but certainly had enjoyed all the work in retrospect.
I was among the first generation to go selected among the outstanding high school graduates to go to France immediately after establishment of diplomatic relations.
Wow, that must be a very
between China
impressive
and
trip.
France. Yeah. I was very fortunate in 1964.
Wow, what did you see there?
Yes.
Well, what was the takeaway of that trip for you as a young lady coming from China?
Yes, it was a pressure on me because I have to think. I had homesick. I thought my parents, they were still in a very difficult working condition. And also those farmers, workers, so their salary very, very low. But our spending in France, equivalent to their 1 year earning. So that's why I had tremendous pressure on me. So study very, very hard. In the late night, when there's no light, so I just use my hand light to read the books. So I said that times are so precious. I have to learn as many as possible, as much as possible. So that's why.
Did you interact with the French then at the time?
Yes.
Did you have the freedom to interact with them?
Yes. Even we had opportunities to organize Christmas parties together and to have weekly or monthly meetings together.
Just think about that. How much a window would they open for a young lady like you from China? decades back.
Yes, I admire at the time that our Premier Zhou Enlai and Deng Xiaoping, they also went to France. So we visited their manufacturers that they have to work
as a hard labor. Yeah.
Hard labor.
Yeah, when they were very young, they went to also France.
We were very fortunate than them. So that's encouragement for us.
Yeah.
I still believe that, I should learn as much as possible to have a solid knowledge to serve my country.
Madam Zhang, you were also participating in China's resumption negotiations into the GATT and then later WTO. You were also a key member in the negotiations between China and the United States, China and EU in terms of intellectual property rights. Those are hard negotiations. I mean, you were the one of the key members studying all the details. Were you having difficulty sleeping at night because there could be a loophole in the scripts that you read through, and yet you said yes, but eventually it could be a problem?
At the time, really, I had a very difficult, challenging job because, we had the new staff, new team, and we have to coordinate different agencies, patents, trademarks, copyrights, and different industries.
And they are new as well.
Yes, so a lot of coordination work as well. Sometimes the negotiations went very difficult, very late. I think I spent almost 1 week in the office. At the time, the office facilities were not as sophisticated, as comfort as today. So only cold water and a wood chair. So, but only slept 2 hours or maximum 3 hours.
On the wooden chair,
yes,
every night?
Yes.
For a whole week?
Yes. So I don't feel bad about that. Rather, it's a good memory for me because I've learned a lot. Because I feel confident that I contribute not only to the ministry that they have assigned me for such important responsibility, to also contribute to the intellectual property legal system establishment. I'm very happy that China's now current rule of law system developed so fast.
Final question for you, Madam Zhang. As a legal expert, if politicians around the world, presidents and premiers around the world having a meeting, and they want you to give a speech, what would you suggest to these people?
I have no ambition.
As a retired appellate body judge of the WTO, what would you say?
As a leader of a country, they have to follow the United Nations Charter for peace and development. It's crucial to enhance the standard of living of all people, and also to promote and improve the rule-based multilateral trading system. Is important.
But what about national interests? They were elected by their own constituencies.
That's the strength of the WTO system, because it's a one single undertaking. It's a mandatory. You agree with the rules, you accept, you join, you take it or you leave it. So there's no grandfather provisions, there's no exceptions, except those general exceptions. I think that is very, very important. If all countries, they follow the same rules to do international trade, enhance the transparency and the predictability. It's good for companies, it's good for governments. I would say that trade works. Trade is the engine for development. Nobody can deny.
That's Madam Zhang Yuejiao, the former member of the WTO appellate body. who has been the very first Chinese woman to play that role. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, you can visit our website. Just type World Insight CCTV News into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.